It doesn't affect me at all. And yet you're sitting in a room with a person who had a personal relationship with someone that fought this fight.
Yesterday, you want me to remember yesterday?
Yesterday, nurses didn't go to college.
No, that's right. They didn't until I was in college, which was 1960 something. We got nurses from the local hospital that came down to Fitchburg State and took courses so they could get their degree.
I mean, it's not really surprising. It's definitely like sad that that was happening, but like if you look at everything else that was happening, men were always trying to control women, and like they didn't want us to have power and vote on things that were more important than just like a local issue.
I'm surprised they didn't even vote on local issues.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I would have been in the room.
Like, oh wow, at least they got to do something, and that's like sad that you even think that.
So this was after women's suffrage passed and
It was a long, decades-long fight, right? And when they made some headway, it was a little bit. They just got an inch, and then it had to. So it was quite a fight, and it was a fight for a long time. Women were arrested for. That's why I put that up there. They were arrested and imprisoned.
And on hunger strikes, force-fed with tubes.
Right.
I'm sorry?
And they went on hunger strikes in prison and then were force-fed by tubes. I mean, it followed the same pattern in the United States that it did in England. That they passed women's suffrage several years earlier.
Do you all remember the first time you voted?
Oh,
Like the very first election that you voted in?
You had to be 21.
Yeah. Oh, so 21 was the voting age at that point?
And I was in college, and boy, I made sure that I was registered when I was home. And I sent off for my absentee ballot because I was away at college. And you had to take your absentee ballot to the post office and it had to be notarized by the postmaster. Off it went. And I remember, even then, I didn't like either person running for president. So I wrote my own candidate.
What about you, Ray? Do you remember the first time you voted?
I don't, but I don't ever remember a time when I knew that I couldn't vote. I was just thinking that I'm going to be 85 next week, so it was only 15 years before I was born that the suffrage act was passed. But I don't remember thinking that there was a possibility I couldn't. So that was good, I guess. And my parents were, my father was particularly good in putting forth my rights to do what I wanted to do, like go to college. And he owned a business in town, and many men came in and said, you aren't going to send that girl to college, are you? So, you know, he said, yeah, he always just said yes. I claimed her before she was born.
Excellent.
You know, but there were a lot of people that were very serious about what was going to come next. I was very serious about preparing for what I was going to do, but my options were limited.
And that's another thing. Your option. When you say your options were limited, what do you mean?
Well, in general, you could be a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary.
Yeah.
And I went to college and thought I wanted to be a med tech. And after I took a few labs, I said, I don't think so. And I asked myself what I'd like to do, and it was reading and writing. So I went down and changed my major to English Ed and became an English teacher. So I was one of the three choices. But it was just so limited. I mean, you didn't have that many options. Today, girls are confused and everybody's confused because they have so many options, so many ways to go. I think it's confusing, but it's also good.
May I brag about you to the students and let them know that you are a published author?
Whatever.
See, I ask permission while I'm doing the thing I'm asking. Edith, I was wondering if you would share, your thoughts on choices for careers.
You shouldn't ask me since I changed mine several times.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was a good thing. My first choice was easy. I always wanted to be a nurse, and that didn't work out. So I left school, and I got a job at DuPont, of all crazy things. And that's where I met my husband. And we moved around a lot. So we finally got to a place where we were going to be for a while, and by then I had 2 kids. So by the time they got on the school bus and went to kindergarten, it was my turn. And so I went back to college, a local school. And I had a heck of a fight because I said I wanted to go in the evening. And in the first place, they didn't give me any credit for the years I've been, and I had to go fight that big time. So then I started going at night, and then I had to get a babysitter because my husband was off starting chemical plants around the world. And then it was a class I wanted to take in the daytime, and I had this big fight with the bursar, and he said, well, no, you signed up to go at night. And I said, excuse me, I need to take this course in the daytime. But you said you had children. I said, yes, but they're in school. I mean, it was the dumbest argument because he just had put me in this category of But what was fascinating to me is when I went back to school, and it had been a long time, the first paper I had to turn in, I completely forgot to write a bibliography. I mean, things like that, skills were gone. But the difference between me and the young students was amazing because they had 1,000 other things to think about. And I was just determined to get this done. I knew I was smart enough to have a degree, and I was ashamed that I didn't, so nothing was going to stop me. So I wound up with a degree in psychology only because I looked at the book and I went through all the requirements of all the different majors, and that was the only one that I can imagine taking most of the courses. My first shot, to be honest with you, was I said, well, I have a husband on the Board of Education, I got 2 little kids, I'll take a degree in education, and then we all have summers off. So I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I walk into this class, which was in the summertime, and it was a long class, it was all morning. I said, well, I'm a diabetic, and if it goes past my lunchtime, I will have food, and I'll sit in the back of the room, and I won't bother anybody. And he said, oh, I really like for people to bring in enough food for everybody. I said, well, maybe education's not for me. So I did come in the next day with 150 pieces of double bubble gum and said, here's your snack. So I decided that education was not for me.
That's so you.
I did wind up with a degree in psychology, and I worked at that university for a long time, and actually got a master's degree. And then, of all the crazy things I wound up doing, a technical job at AT&T, and I started working at an insurance company, and I said, all right, I'll be a trainer, that's my skill. So they sat me down in front of a computer, this was early 80s, and they had hours and hours of computer training on how a computer works and what it does when it grows up and what the printer does, and I mean, it was nuts. And then after a couple of years, when I got a job offer somewhere else, the vice president said to me, well, would you say if we gave you more money? I said, I certainly think about it. They said, nah, we don't do that. So I left. And wound up doing of all the crazy things, working with computers at AT&T. And then finally, my last job at AT&T was doing my skills. But it took forever to get to that. But I'll be honest with you, the only thing that saved my sanity was the first thing I did when I got to a town was join the League of Women Voters, because I had little kids and I needed to talk to somebody who was over 3 feet tall. And so I've been in the League of Women Voters for so long that I don't have to pay dues anymore. And that was as good as going to college as far as what I learned, aside of being in a new town and finding people that I could talk to.
Are students familiar with the League of Women Voters?
Pardon me?
I asked the students if they were familiar with the League of Women Voters.
The League of Women Voters was founded by all those suffrage, they don't call them suffragettes in the U.S., they're what are they? They're not suffragettes, they're suffragists.
Suffrage.
Yeah.
They're not jits, that's the U.S., that's in the UK. It's a slightly different word, but anyway, when they got the right to vote, it was quite obvious that women, all the new voters, needed to know how the system worked, what Congress is all about, how you got elected, how politicians became, and so the original purpose of the League of Women Voters was to educate voters, and it's still my favorite part of the League. And then after a while, they also began taking positions on various pieces of legislation, nationally, locally. And they do it through a process called consensus. They don't really vote on stuff. So it's a really interesting way to come to a decision that's supported. And I give them a lot of respect for doing that. Some of the things that they have done have been pretty amazing, and some of them, to me, when I look back on it, do you remember white margarine with a little capsule and you had that rice? Okay?
Yes.
You hated it.
My mom used to give it to me and I
And
had
you
to
had to go
squeeze
squish it. So that's one of the issues that the National League of Women Voters took on, was to make margarine yellow.
There was a powder.
And so Judy, you were in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk a little bit about that? What was it like?
Well, the first thing was, your question about pushback. Unlike your father, my father was very upset. As a World War II veteran, he had a very distinct image of women in the service, and he wasn't so keen on it. My mother, on the other hand, was, well, why not? If that's what you want to do. And I found the discussion about feeling pressed for time. I find it amazing that all of you younger people have indicated you knew what you wanted to do when you entered college. I had no clue. I just knew I needed an education. At the time, I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist because I was very keen on ancient history and fascinated by the history of ancient Egypt and Greece and Rome. And that's kind of the direction I went initially, until Greek and I had a parting of the ways. and so I just kind of drifted through college. Just a major gave you certain courses that you had to take, but I went to a liberal arts college, and I really looked at the purpose of those 4 years was to enlighten me. An education. I didn't look at college as job training, I guess is what you'd say. Engineering, medicine, dentistry, all of that is preparing you for a career. To my mind, particularly liberal arts is teaching you how to think and discover. And it wasn't until I was, and like many of all of us here, you know, as a fail-safe, I had an education minor in secondary education. But I was beginning to discover, just in the practice teaching phase, that maybe this wouldn't be for me. And by the time I finished college, I had figured out that really what I was interested in was the financial world and business, and I needed another degree for that. But I went to college on a scholarship, and I didn't have money to go to graduate school. And I found it very difficult to get a job with a liberal arts degree. I did a variety of things, and not the least, it was a woman's companion, a dog handler, you name it. It paid the insurance bill, and I did it. And but my goal was always to get the business degree, and I saw an ad specifically directed to female college graduates to join the Air Force Officer Corps. And I thought, well, I learned about the GI Bill. I said, this is a way for me to get to graduate school. No intentions of staying. But I found, once I was in, that the work was challenging. It became abundantly clear that I had far more opportunities in the military than I did in the civilian workforce and business. And so I stayed for 20 years. And saw a lot of the world on a temporary basis. I was in the research and development end of the Air Force with new weapon systems being brought into the inventory, and responsible for leading negotiating teams for new aircraft, new satellite systems, new command and control systems, and having to put my name and be criminally responsible for multi-million, billion-dollar contracts.
And that led you to your deployment?
Well, I was, like I said, I went temporarily to a lot of places. I was in Germany for 6 months, leading teams to do emergency repairs on aircraft, and I led negotiation teams in Saudi Arabia, which is a whole new experience. I don't recommend going there, ever. And representing the United States with the Ministry of Defense in the UK. And spending time in the White House.
Yes, Judy was assigned to the White House. She worked, do I have to brag for you, all of you? She worked with the president. She worked with the Pentagon. Yes. Reagan.
Writing new procurement law. Yeah, I'm reluctant to say that, you know, that 18 months probably was the biggest contributor to my very jaded view of government. Sometimes you get too close to the flame and you don't like what you see.
Yeah. And how were you, do you think you were treated different because you were a woman?
Yeah, I just to some degree, and I think, you know, some of the discussion we had about, you know, the limitations on women, and, you know, in some ways I didn't feel directly carrying the flag, if you will, but I was in the military during a time, particularly in those first 6 years, of tremendous change. And when I went in, I had no idea. I suspected, because one of the decisions I made about the Air Force versus the Army and the Navy was that the Air Force was the only service that had integrated training between men and women for the officer corps.
Yeah.
Both the Navy and the Army still had separate training. The Waves is a separate corps, and the Army is the WACS is a separate corps. Separate promotion, separate everything. And that didn't appeal to me at all. All of these things changed within the first 3 to 6 years, from 1970 to 73, 74. And you have to remember, it wasn't until 73 that females were finally admitted to the service academies. So the only path for a female to become an officer was through officer training school. Even when I entered in late '69, they were doing the first tests at 3 Southeastern universities as to whether women would work out in ROTC. So the fight these women started still was going on in the 70s.
Well, Professor Lauren,
Yeah.
I'm probably wrong because I'm just pulling this out of the back of my head, but women could not get a bank loan without their husband's signature. Was it 1974?
Oh, I think it was, yeah, maybe even later than that.
Was
I
it?
think my grandma was telling me she couldn't get a credit card in the 1980s without my grandpa signing off on
And
it.
could
So
not go for a loan without her husband's
right.
co-signature. Jane, you're having a reaction to that.
I
You want
do
to say
remember
something
that.
about
I do
that?
remember that.
Yeah,
Jane,
most of us remember that.
yes. Jane, could you, I think that our guests might be interested to know what your last position was.
Well, I thought it was in computers, of all things, because when I went off to college, I chose my college, which was a women's college. And that was partly because of my family. But when I went off to college, I was math phobic. Let's put it that way.
What?
Math phobic,
Okay.
and still am. And I ended up as director of technical services at Riviera in the library. Because most people think that library science is, and I got a master's in library science, is reading books. You know, oh, you must love books. Well, no, you have to love computers. And computers were just coming in at that time. All the colleges were going computer, getting rid of the card catalogs. And that was the big thing. And it was very, very challenging. But luckily we had a director who liked doing that kind of thing. So she made sure that we had a system. I think they've had 3 or 4 systems since, because all they would give us was a dinky little system. And we called it Reggie at the time. I don't know what they call it now. But I started out, as many people here, my father always said, as you said in the beginning, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So it was a given that I would go to college. But he was so insistent that I be a teacher. And I really wasn't that interested in teaching, and I would just listen to what he said, in one ear and out the other. And I did take the education courses along with English, like Ray. And I ended up in English. It wasn't what I started out as. I wanted to be a language teacher, which was what my counselors in high school said I should do. I liked Latin, I liked French, I wanted to take Spanish. I didn't like the department when I got to that school. So I had a choice of maybe, it was a liberal arts school, so maybe history or English. And I ended up English with an education minor. Didn't really want to teach, and was it's all very nebulous in my mind as to what I was going to do when I graduated with an English major if I didn't teach. So some of my friends were going to New York City. I went to school right outside New York City. And there were 4 of us who were going to room together. And one was in psychology, and I don't know what the others were. But I had this idea of something to do in publishing. Well, everywhere I went, it was, can you type? And I wasn't going to type, because I had done that during the summers at an insurance company in Hartford. I lived in Connecticut. And so I did go to, my first job was at an insurance company in the planning department, which was very interesting because it did involve publishing and printing and all that kind of thing. But then I got married and had children, and it wasn't until my youngest child was maybe 5 or 6 that I decided I would go back and get a library degree, master's in library science, which I did, and tried out different jobs in schools and so forth. Wasn't particularly interested in that, and kind of had my eye on Riviera at the time because we lived in Nashua. And that did work out for me. It was very challenging, very interesting getting into computers. Now everything has changed so much that I have to go to my daughter to find out what to do with this or that on the computer. But so that was basically my story, I guess. But it's.
And then here's the big question. All right, the big question would be, this generation that's sharing their experiences with you today have left quite a legacy for you and for the future.
Don't scare them.
And so I thought it might be interesting to think about what you might want to, say 50 years from now, if there's some crazy person like me that wants to pull a thing like this together, and you're in a room like this, what would you want to be sharing with that future generation? What legacy do you want to leave for the future generation? So those are some of the questions that we will pick up for the next time.
I know that there's a couple students that definitely can't make it, so I'm curious, do you guys have any thoughts on this, on a legacy that you hope your generation leaves behind for future generations?
But you're not gonna make them write an essay, right?
Sure I'm not. So this is their chance.
Oh gosh.
I know, why am I looking at you? That's what she's thinking, why is she looking at you?
I think it's important for like women to like remain strong, and I feel like right now there's a lot of pressure from social media for us to look like a certain way and like be like perfect and kind of like look perfect for guys too, and have like the perfect body type. And I think like for me, like social media is a lot of pressure, and I think it would be big for us to overcome that and just kind of come together as women and realize like we're more than just our body and like our image and everything. And I think that's going to be really important for a young woman too, like looking up to us.
That's excellent. Excellent.
I think it's kind of incredible. I work over at Girls Inc., so I am surrounded by the next generation under me every day. And the ways that they know things at the ages that they're at, between 5 and 14, that like I didn't know when I was 14, that I wouldn't have learned until I was 18. And the way that they are so accepting right now because of what has been paved for them is so amazing. The way that they will turn on each other if one of them says something that's like even a little bit like racist, or even like speak down on themselves, they will turn on them and they go, "You can't say that." And it's like an 8-year-old saying, "You can't say that," and you're like, "Well, thanks for doing my job for me. I'm the adult here and you just did that, so that's pretty cool. But even though there's this amazing growth, there's still, like you said, social media, the way that it's affecting them is horrifying. And kids don't feel like they can be kids. They feel like they need to be an adult before they're even 10 because of what they see online and how they see their older classmates act. And it's like so sad. And I want for them, to not feel that way. As much as they should know that they have so many opportunities and that they can do so many great things. Like, live in that childhood.
Thank you, Haley.
Somehow we need to help younger people understand that how they think of themselves is far more important than how others see them. Do not cater to the others. You must be yourself. Love yourself. It's the most important person in the world to love, is yourself.
And there's such a societal, like, self-deprecation right now where it's okay for them to go, oh, I can't do this. Like, I'm not creative. I can't write. I can't answer this question. And I think it's up to us to spin them on that and be like, no, you can. You're just not letting yourself. And you need to love yourself.
You're great. Thomas.
The question? Oh man, I would say that I think like something that I try to do, that I encourage my male friends to do, is to give women like the platform in any way that we can help to kind of advocate for themselves and not ever like get in the way of what they're doing, because I think that the most important thing for making advances is women having a voice and advocating for themselves. So anything we can do to help with that, I think, is the legacy that I'd want to leave behind.
Very nice. Great. Aurora?
Yes.
Oh.
Kind of going back to what we were saying about social media. So I work at an all-girls summer camp, and I'm in a cabin with girls who are around the age of 12, and they go away for 2 weeks, and they're not allowed to bring their cell phone with them. And they, like, that first night, they are like heartbroken. They're like, I don't know if I can do this. And then by like the next day, it's incredible to see, like, once they start their activities and to realize what they are actually capable of doing. It's wonderful, and I love it. And I think we should try to encourage that more, just to take a break from being on your phone or like being surrounded by technology. Like, we're on an island in the middle of the woods.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's kind of thrilling.
But it's so wonderful to see them like come back into the cabin after all their activities, and they're like, I did this, this, and this, and you're like, wow, that's really incredible that you did all of that all by yourself, no help, no technology with you. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
to add on to that, I think people, well, kids specifically now are focused on YouTube and they don't really socialize. Like, I have young nieces and they always want to be on their iPads. And I'm like, get off your iPad, I want to talk to you. Tell me how was school and all of that. I don't know. So I think now kids should, not be on YouTube so much and learn to socialize, because I don't really see kids socializing as much, playing outside. Like, when I was a kid, I was always outside, and now you don't see that.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate everybody's participation. I thought it was a great conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you
it
for
was.
hosting, Michelle. This was
Yeah,
a great
thank you for
idea.
putting this
This was really nice.
You're welcome. It was collaborative.
Sure was.
Yes.
And we're doing it again. So.
Yes, stay tuned. So yes, stay tuned. They're all here. I'm so excited. Last time when we met, which was a week ago, we have a lot of new faces since then, but what we did was we kind of got to know the residents, and we heard a lot about their stories, some of their personal experiences, especially our two women that are veterans, right? And so some of the students were very surprised to know that you served, Judy, as a cryptographer, decoding secret messages. And so that was a point of interest. And then our other veteran, who's also our other Judy.
It seems that Judy's going to do it.
Judy and Judy. And of course I had to like pull this information. They didn't like just voluntarily give this.
Michelle,
but
I
she
can barely hear you down here.
that no one ever complains about me not talking loud enough.
Not at all, I had to be the first.
So Judy, everyone was really surprised and pleased to hear her stories about working in the White House during her military service and in the Pentagon. We had another woman here who was the head librarian for Rivier University.
Oh.
And so she told us a little bit about herself. Today what we would like to do, after we have a brief introduction, because we're all a lot of new faces, what we would like to do is have more of a exchange, more of a conversation today. Last week was more of an introduction. So, you know what? I'm going to start with you.
We can do that.
And then we'll go around the room this way, okay? So would you just introduce yourself?
Yeah.
And we'd love to know your major.
Sure. So my name's Krista. I'm a senior political science major with a minor in history. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today.
I'm Michaela. I'm a senior biology major with a minor in history. And is there anything else wrong?
That's perfect.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Nicole Loring. I'm assistant professor of political science at Rivier University. The students are either in my Women in Politics class or my West in the World class, Western Civilization, or propaganda and conspiracy theories. So we have a variety of different topics that we're learning about.
I'm Maddie. I'm a junior at Rivier, and I'm a criminal justice major.
I'm Judy, and I'm the Air Force veteran.
Hi, I'm Esther, and I live at home by Hunt.
Hello, I'm Gavin. I'm a freshman history major at Rivier University.
Hi, my name's Edith, and I live here at the Hunt.
I'm Hannah. I'm a senior psychology major with a history minor.
I'm Molly. I'm a freshman and I'm doing elementary education.
My name's Genesis. I'm a sophomore for a major. Wait, I'm so sorry. My name's Genesis. I am going through it for elementary education.
Hi, I'm Dolly, and I'm a senior citizen. That was good.
I'm Marcia, and in case you haven't guessed, I'm a senior citizen too, and I'm here by way of New York and San Juan, so it's a change.
Hello, Marcia. My name is Pam, and I've lived here at the Hunt for 6 years.
My name is Judy, and I'm a retired teacher and a retired naval officer.
I'm Farah. I am a senior public health major.
Thank you. And I'm Michelle, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Hunt Community. So today, to start off the conversation, we were thinking, I was talking to a couple of people, and we thought it was really fascinating that we are having a symposium like this thinking about the 100 years of the women's movement and the women's struggle and the advancements that have been made over that time period. And yet today, actually today, we could also be talking about how some of those advancements are at risk. They're in jeopardy right now. And at the very same time, what is also happening today is a vote on the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. So would anybody like to start off? I mean, I know that that's a lot to digest, a lot to dissect, but Dolly, would you like to start us off?
Well, Michelle, if you insist.
I do.
I think my mentality within being a politician today, possibly, as opposed to it being the Republican Party, because Liz Cheney is a Republican Party and doesn't think anything like them. I mean.
But look at what they're all doing to her.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a low voice in all of that party there.
I guess that's what made me ask the question.
But it absolutely is politicians, but the politicians cater to their public. If people didn't expect them to run on the platforms they run on, they wouldn't be doing it. So that's why I think it is the people in the long run.
I think it's essentially the Trump party now, really. So much of it. It's changed radically, but it's definitely Trumpian.
Do you think that the next election coming up will answer that question more positively?
I think the indicators are that it's going in that direction.
It still is.
I think so.
And unfortunately, I don't see people who voted for Trump the first time, or the one time, not doing it a second time.
Then, since this is a women's symposium, I don't want to take this over though.
Go ahead.
Were you surprised at the number of women that support him?
Yes.
Trump. It is kind of
Very
surprising.
surprised.
It is.
And I have a friend who's a lifelong Republican. And when all that stuff came out about him doing what he loves doing with women, summer of 16, she said, okay, that's it. I can't vote for him. And wouldn't you know it, by November, she forgot all about it, and she voted for him? Because she's a Republican.
But aside from that, there is, and that's not a political thing, there just seems to be a almost worldwide thing that whatever you can get away with, you can do. And so we have people that have done absolutely horrendous things, including the aforementioned, and they haven't paid a price. The idiots have not paid a price for the stuff that they have done. Putin is doing the same damn thing in Ukraine. There is nobody stopping him because nobody has made anybody pay a price. So my question is, what happens to you all when you look at that? I mean, I feel really bad about my children and my grandchildren, and I've left them a world that is going back. I mean, I'm one of the peace marchers in Washington. What good did it do? And the shock of what's going on in Ukraine truly gives me nightmares. It's World War II all over again. I don't want to live through that again. I'm so horrified. So what do you think of it when you look at that? Am I the only one that's having nightmares?
No.
I think more about.
This whole thing, whatever you can get away with, you can do.
It's up to the young people to change this trend.
But
Well,
we have a young
I
person
noticed
who
over
has an
here that there's a few girls wanted to say something.
I'm sorry, I can't hear that.
No, I was just saying, especially like with what's going on in Ukraine. So, one of my friends, her boyfriend is from Czech, and his family has actually gotten a call asking if they can like house one of the Ukraine, like a family from
Refugees.
Ukraine, and it's kind of it's scary because like he has like a younger sibling and all that. So like he wants him to come to the U.S. so he's like safe, and it's kind of like sad with what's going on over there because like my family's from Ukraine, so like a part of me is like, oh no, like I'm kind of a little like upset, even though I've never been there, but my great grandma had lived there, and then she came over to the U.S. so like our family could have like a better life and like start a family over here. So it's kind of upsetting to see part of where I am get in such a.
And look what's going to happen with the refugees are all the women and the children and the men over 60. So what's going to happen to those women who are going to have to figure out how to survive when they pick up a plane full of them and go fly everywhere or get on a train for 3 days? So that's a real threat to all those women who are left to keep as much family together as they can find.
Edith, what about all the men, single men that are coming across the border? 18,000, 20,000, I hear a different number every day. And Biden's going to cancel. I don't know how to talk about it, but I see every once in a while on TV all of these young men coming across the border. And I guess it's Title 42 or something that that Biden is going to not renew, or, as I said, I don't know the wording, but it's going to open the border, the southern border, to anybody who wants to come through.
No,
So I just think
we have an
that's not
immigration
true.
law that's
That's not
actually
true.
an immigration law, not
You
just
think
the
it's not
hodgepodge.
true?
Title 42 has to do with COVID and expedited
Yes.
deportation.
And because COVID is no longer that big of a deal, they're going to do away with it, so now it's going to open the border. That's what it
But
is.
to get back to the question she asked is, what are those women going to do? And in my opinion, I have never seen European women more resilient than anybody I've ever met in my life.
I think
And
all women
admirable.
I beg your pardon?
Really.
I think all women are resilient.
They are, but they're particularly resilient because they have hard lives. They don't have the support we have in the United States in terms of all the different organizations, they have a church. They don't have all the different organizations we have in the United States because of what's happened here. You know, if you have nursing students, if you have cancer, there's all kinds of organizations to come in to help you set up your house, to help you deal with the family giving medications. If you have children and you're poor, there's all kinds of organizations and churches to help you out. They don't have that in Europe.
Oh, certainly they do. I'm sorry, Dolly.
It depends on where you're from.
Isn't that true in this country too?
You know,
Look at the number of people in the United States that don't have that support that you're talking about. We are not the golden place that I thought we were when I took a history class when I was in the 5th grade.
well, some of it is that they don't know where to go. And my father is European. Do you think he would ask for help? Do you think he would go and ask for food stamps? Are you kidding me? That would never happen. He had too much pride for that. So he took a 3rd job instead.
Christy, you had a thing earlier you wanted to say.
So I'm actually going into international relations for graduate studies. And I mean, the Ukraine and the whole Russian ordeal, it's kind of changing the rules of politics a lot. And I've talked with Dr. Loring about this, and it's kind of scary to see how many people are either supporting him or not supporting him and not doing anything about it.
Who's him? I didn't catch.
So, Putin.
Oh, Putin.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Russia.
Well, if you do anything against him, it's risking your
Exactly,
life,
and
so.
yes, and that's the whole ordeal is right, and that's the whole ordeal about NATO and trying to not use nuclear power and chemical weapons. The whole thing is changing, and yes, the use of soft power is working in a sense. So soft power meaning like diplomacy, economics, in a sense, but it's kind of scary to see how other countries are supporting Putin when they know it's not right after the aftermath of World War II. So.
How do you guys feel about two things? One is, it seems to me that it's 1939 all over again.
Yeah.
Chamberlain.
That's my nightmare, exactly.
Yeah, but I think we're there. It's not a nightmare, it's a reality.
You were there. My
And
parents
second
were-
is.
My parents came to this country in the 30s.
Well, my parents lived through it, so I've heard all about it. The problem is that Russia has nuclear weapons. I get that. And I understand that nobody wants a third world war, and I get that too. Problem is, if you don't do anything because there are nuclear weapons involved, then you're giving people who are tyrants like Putin a carte blanche to do anything they want, anywhere, at any time of their choosing. So how far are we willing to take that until we actually do take action?
Well, look how far Hitler went.
Yeah.
But that's my problem, that this is exactly the same thing, and people just aren't seeing it.
If I may, something that I've been thinking about during this time is when we're looking at relationships between countries who have nuclear weapons, they're going to be more soft with each other because they don't want to use those weapons. Something that we talked about in Dr. Loring's class is like,
please.
something that we talked about in Dr. Loring's class is countries that have nuclear weapons who have like problems with other countries that don't have nuclear weapons might be more reasonable to use them because there's no backlash on them. And I think one of the main problems that NATO is having right now with Russia and with Ukraine is that NATO can't really overstep its boundaries because Ukraine's not a NATO member, and it's not in the EU. And if the EU or NATO were to enforce a no-fly zone in Ukraine, they'd be taking action against Russia, which would make the EU and NATO, who have nuclear weapons, having a conflict with another nuclear weapon country. So I think the whole situation right now is so complex because no one wants to use their weapons on each other, but no one wants to over push Russia because we know what they have and what they're capable of. And so it's really challenging to step up and try to stop him from doing what he's doing without enforcing, which could cause conflict, and no one wants that.
But that's my point. If you're so afraid of him using those nuclear weapons, then there's nothing to stop him from doing anything he wants at any time.
And he knows it.
Of course he does. He's not stupid.
He already took over Crimea.
He's not stupid.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he's killing children and bombing schools and
I
maternity
don't
wards.
think there's a house or any sort of building that is intact in all of Ukraine anymore. I mean, who's going to rebuild that?
Russia is if they annex them. They're going to have to.
If
Russia's main goal is to annex Ukraine again, they're going to have to, which is probably not going to happen.
Really?
But
Do you remember Stalin starving 4 million people in Ukraine to death?
I mean, look at what's going on in the Crimea too. Like, if Russia's doing this, then it's Russia's responsibility to take action for what they've done. I know it sounds funny saying, and they're probably not going to do
No,
it.
it's not funny.
But
It's just sad that
And it doesn't
you
stop
expect them
there
to do
because
something that you know is never going to happen.
Yeah, President Xi is watching what we're doing with Putin,
Look at what
twisting his whiskers.
Look at what that regime has done to all of the Russians, never mind Ukrainians.
Russian Jews.
All Russians.
I mean,
Russia is a poor country when it comes to the actual populace because there is a very thin strata at the very top that are billionaires. That money belongs to that country. They've been bilking it for years now. So they're going to rebuild something? Really?
What does this have to do with women? It's a women's symposium. I think we ought to get back to that.
I actually have
Right.
a question for you Hunt community residents. We were talking earlier about the confirmation hearings for Justice Jackson, and one of the things we talked about in the Women in Politics class recently was about the Anita Hill event that took place when Clarence Thomas was being confirmed. And I had explained to my students what happened in 1992, but I was just wondering if any of you remember what that was like when Anita Hill was testifying about Clarence Thomas, and whether you saw similarities between the way, as you mentioned, Justice Jackson being questioned as she was speaking to the Senate compared to what Anita Hill had to go through.
It's an interesting question. I was employed at that time, so I didn't watch Clarence Thomas's, and so I would not be a good person to try to make that analogy, if you would, you know, because I don't like watching the news and having somebody else tell me what they think about that.
Sure.
I'd like to watch it myself and form my own opinion, and I can't do that.
I remember being in Spain exactly at that time, and in the car there was one English station, or English speaking station, and I just remember Anita Hill and her story that kept reverberating. And at the time it seemed almost impossible that it would be true. It was so beyond the pale.
What, that she was telling the truth, or the way she was being attacked?
No, that she was telling the truth. Honestly, I
didn't doubt it for a
you know
minute.
when you
Amen,
Well,
sister.
I had a
Amen.
hard time either way. It was just, I guess I was so naive at the time.
I spent 20 years in a male environment, and no, I wasn't surprised at all. No.
I wasn't surprised
And,
either.
the questioning, very, very little difference. I think I did not watch all of Judge Jackson's interrogation, but what snippets I did hear on the part of the Republican questioners was right in line with the whole deal with Anita Hill.
The whole
You know, she becomes.
It was in line with Anita Hill's.
Yeah, Anita Hill
Do you remember when there was a congressional investigation and they put Hillary Clinton on question for, it went on for what, a day and a half? They did the same thing to the woman who had a Planned Parenthood. How many days did she spend without losing her cool? They would never do that to a man.
The woman who was the ambassador to Ukraine during Trump's impeachment.
remember her?
Yeah.
She's
And
first
so, but
impeachment.
they would never, ever.
Yeah.
Clarification.
It doesn't surprise me at all. It is, it's the white-haired old men.
Yeah.
Right.
And unfortunately, we have now a generation, not a generation, but we have a number of young white men in Congress who are following in their footsteps.
No, they're worse.
Apparently
They're
out
worse than the old
of
guys.
fear of change.
So that
That they're
that's
going to lose power.
Judy, that's exactly what, I mean, we can't wait till they die off.
No.
And
Well, you're gonna have a long way. because
I'll get my 38 out and go.
the last time Congress messed with voting rights, it took this country, it took Congress 75 years to fix it. We don't have 75, you don't have 75 years, I'm gonna be gone.
And voting
And
rights
so-
is being undone.
So if it doesn't get changed now, I don't know what's going to happen. It's what I like to think was a great democracy, and it's going to sunset a whole lot sooner than I thought it would.
With gerrymandering of all the different districts, the way they draw the
Absolutely, yeah, well,
maps.
that's a
It's
standard
a
game.
guaranteed no vote.
It's a standard game, and unfortunately, the party never wins the whole national vote, so they're doing it piece by piece, state by state. and they're gonna get it by cheating.
Well, on the matter of gerrymandering, both parties are guilty.
It's standardized.
Whoever controls
every 10
a
years.
state legislature, come the census,
Every 10
The
years.
system is set up to
gerrymander
encourage you
it.
to
Yeah, I mean,
gerrymander.
it's set up to allow it.
So
Against the law.
is there I know there's not an answer to this question now, but I'm just wondering if more women got involved in politics and were able to balance some of the men that we have in both parties, whether or not that would make a difference. What do you think?
Well, look at Marjorie Greene, Taylor Greene.
Greene, yeah.
God.
That's about power.
I think we just.
It's always about power.
When it comes to Congress, it's all about.
Always about power.
Yeah.
You think?
I mean, as a woman in the political science field, I'm sure Dr. Lauren can attest to this too.
Could you just talk up just a little?
Yeah, I said as a woman in the political science field, and I'm sure Dr. Lauren can attest to this too, I think it's the matter of whether or not we need women who are going to do a great job. It's not the matter of like, if yes, a woman can come into power, and if they don't do anything with that power, what does that do for women? Like, yes, there's representation of that woman, but are they going to do anything to help fix the issues? And that's the huge problem.
Is ethics part of that?
I think so.
Yes, it
I
should
mean,
be, but it's not.
politics is all about ethics and morality and trying to figure out what to say and what to do in order to gain power. That's just the nature of the game. But I think if you actually do something with that power and your podium, then that's, as a woman, you're able to make a difference. And that's what we need. We don't necessarily need women that are just going to step up to not do anything, to be taken over by the male-dominated field. I think we need people that are actually going to do something about it.
Is that something we're doing now? Have you ever been in a group and afraid to share your opinion?
Not me. Definitely not me. I am one of the most outspoken people there is, but I mean, it's just, I think people have to get there though. I feel like women do feel shut down because it is such a male-dominated field. But I think we, as the century is growing up, like with AOC, and we have younger women coming into power, I think that's enabling women to try and be like, oh, I can do this too. So I hope that's going to change within our generation and the generation below us, that women feel more empowered to come into political fields.
So shut down because they don't feel prepared,
Right.
shut down
Yeah.
because they're embarrassed, shut down.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's a huge issue within women in politics. We've discussed this a lot, that women don't necessarily feel qualified enough to run. Like, they wait until they get their master's degree, they wait until they get their doctorates within like a law or political field, because they don't feel prepared enough to do this, whereas we see young men in their 30s coming to power, whereas they have connections. And that's the only reason they're getting into power. And women, exactly, and like women feel like they have to be more prepared. And then they also get the scrutiny of, are they a mother? Are they taking care of their children? And that's not right. If you're able to do the right job, then let them do the job correctly.
Well, as long as you have an electorate that is looking more for men than for women, and women have to perform 10 times as well as a man, then you're going to have more men elected. That's all there is to it.
And I think people are scared.
It doesn't even come down to the woman wanting to or feeling qualified or not.
No, exactly.
You miss philosophy, but that's the first thing that came to my mind when you said shut down. Because we had a gentleman there who was very opinionated and very dismissive of everybody else. And it was very difficult for us because there was no use making a point, and 99% of the time, this part of me was angry, and this part of me felt paralyzed. I couldn't stand it, you know. I'm Italian besides. That's a blessing and a curse, right? So my hackles were up, And, you know, we got through it, but I always ask myself, just the question you said, could I have done a better job? Would education would have made that easier? No, I have a master's, you know.
Right.
It wouldn't have made any difference if it was bile-high and deep, you know? So that would have made no difference at all, because it was emotional.
Yeah.
Excuse me, was he just dismissive of women?
No.
No, oh, no,
Opinion,
no,
anyone's
no, he
opinion,
was-
but their own.
Okay.
No.
I have a question. You brought up AOC, so I have a question with regard to, quote, the posse.
Yeah.
They're very vocal, and in the spectrum of positions, they're considered, quote, extreme.
Yes.
Does that in fact have the reverse effect of what they're trying to achieve?
You get a whole report on her, so she
As opposed to
our AOC expert.
as opposed to, you know, a more moderate position, but being very vocal about it.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% yes. So, I'm sorry. So I think with AOC, she's very, very progressive, right? And that she falls on the extreme side. And that can scare a lot of people who are on the other extreme side, who fall more moderate, while they may agree with some of the things that, you know, her beliefs. It can be scary because she's pushing so far for such extreme change. And I think when or I guess anyone pushes for extreme change, it's out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because it's not the normal, it's not what we're used to. And that can cause a reverse action to what she wants. So absolutely, I think she is a very controversial political figure. And I think her calling for extreme change causes a lot of pushback, especially from the Conservative Party, because it deviates so far from their beliefs. And her being a woman as well, there's a lot more scrutiny on her. So 100% yes,
Yeah.
I think it definitely causes a lot of backlash,
Damage.
the opposite of what she's calling for, yeah.
But I think also in a sense she's kind of helped in a way. I mean, I feel like women have become more empowered by her in a sense that they're not afraid to speak up. I mean, especially with our generation being very vocal, and the use of technology and the use of social media, we're more likely to do protests in that form. And I think, yes, there is pushback, but I also think the younger generation wants to see these changes happening.
I'm sorry, what's the end of that?
I was saying, I think our generation wants to see these changes happening. And yes, it may be extreme for this time, but I feel like it's doable.
Yeah.
She wants to march with you, Eva.
Yes, I will go with you.
That includes the males in your generation also?
Males have changed a lot.
I can speak up
Yes.
on that. A lot of, no, it's okay. I think a lot of guys, especially my generation, even at RIB, are kind of sick of the old ways and how men just assume that they can do these things with without consequence. Like, I know my hometown is very conservative, and I'm on the complete opposite. You know, I grew up in a 4-mom household. My family's very progressive, and so even then, like after the whole Trump administration, a lot of people are shifting away, especially at my age, are shifting away from that because they're kind of just disgusted with how it went out. And we're trying to support newer ideas, and it's just, yeah, I think that a lot of men are, especially my age, are supporting all of this.
There's a lot, you know, it's interesting, my grandchildren keep giving me a hard time because I can't keep up with the language.
We are very confusing, so.
So as far as I'm concerned, they is a plural noun, and I have these wonderful arguments with my grandson, and he'll just have to forgive me because I'm gonna have a hard time switching over to that. But there is definitely the impact of language. I mean, when I was growing up, you never said the word breast, right?
That's right.
And thanks to all the fuss about breast cancer and all that push, all of a sudden breast is a real word that everybody can use and you don't have to go hide in the closet. But I'm telling you, you never said that word, right?
That's correct.
So language has a big impact, so
It does.
you can make a difference that way in social media, right?
Sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
Go ahead, honey.
I think also like with like language too, like our generation is trying to, I feel like we're trying to like break away from like traditional like roots, and like we're kind of going in like, I feel like we're going in a different direction. Cause I know like personally from coming from a Canadian background and my Pepe like being like the woman like runs the household like that, stays at home and like doesn't work, and like he's the one that provides for the family. And like now like I feel like in our generation like we're realizing like no, we can actually provide for the household along with our significant other, like we're pulling, I feel like we are pulling away like more and more from like the traditional like roots, and like trying to help even like our grandparents like understand where we're coming from, and like even though we understand where they come from, so like I feel like we are still like in a sense sticking to traditions and like pulling what generations before us have like come up with, like even in, I feel like almost even in politics too, like but then we also like we're putting our own like spin on it.
I also want to say like the importance of like different families, like the more LGBTQ plus families that come around kind of throw gender norms out the window. Like I had 2 moms growing up. There was no dad in the household to do one thing. So both my moms are hard workers. They voted. They did all these things that, some families would be like, that's not what the woman's supposed to do. And I feel like with the more like LGBTQ families and the more people who don't care about gender norms, the better it will be for society and for politics at least. Because then there are people like me who don't care about what gender you are. Like, are you going to do the job to help what the country needs? I think that's what is more important than the gender role. It's not important anymore. It's, will you do the job right?
That would be wonderful, but this is exactly, the opposite is happening. They're trying to turn away from.
They're trying to push it back.
Right. Especially with
take that away.
to look back at, I mean, the whole ordeal right now with the Roe v. Wade trying to be overturned, and that's sparking a huge debate, and it's scary. It's so scary, because like, you all did that for us, like
It's scary because women don't have control over their whole bodies. I mean,
and people are getting mad.
But I'll tell you a quick story that's really funny. I come from a very strong female background. My grandmother, when she came to this country, the first job she took, her boss tried to get fresh with her. She was a very attractive woman, long black hair, Italian. And so she took the bobbin and she cracked his head. So she got arrested. So she can't speak English naturally. So my dad went down. He had to go and explain what happened, so on and so forth. And she thought for sure she was going to get fired, but she was a very good worker. So they moved her boss into a different department. Yeah, so he could do it again, you know. So my mom, when we were growing up, we used to laugh about that, and my aunt was telling me, my mother never spoke about this, but when she first got married, my father tried to control her. And she said, oh yeah? Well, back then the YMCA had rooms, so she moved out to the YMCA and told him, when you change your attitude, let me know, and then I'll come home. So he changed his attitude.
Yes. I love that. Wow. That's amazing.
What's amazing is, I don't know where that came from in them. I wish I did. I really, really don't. But I wish I did, because I bottle it, you know?
It's a strength of character.
It really is, yeah. But where did that come from? I mean, where does that strength of character
I don't know.
come
I
from?
think you're born with it. And an example, possibly. You know, somebody sets an example and you see it's possible. You have it in you, and then you follow.
I understood why my father married her, because his mother was such a strong person. So now I understand what he saw in my mom.
Yeah.
I think that's another way of like why women are silent about things and like don't come out of their, like we form like a shell in us, even like it just like in anything in general, like maybe if we don't like want to talk about something like that, I feel like that's one of the things that like we do tend to keep bottled up, but like it's also good to like express that and how you're feeling, like especially like with the whole like situations on like sexual assault and like how more and more like women are starting to open up about that. Especially like I wrote a 10-page paper on Dr. Loring's class about this, especially like in the gymnastics world and how like that happened, and once one person opened up, another person opened up, and like I think that just like helped. And especially like having like young girls, like if something like happens to you and you don't think it's like right and you like try to speak up, like it's tough. Because like when I was younger, my teacher like jokingly, like we were all like walking in, he accidentally like slapped me on the butt, and I was like he missed the first time and hit me again, and I was like so nervous to like open up about it, especially because like my best friend's mom was a teacher in the school. So like once it happened, like it was like 7 girls and 7 boys in my class at the time, and like all the boys immediately went and like, okay, you're sitting in between all of us at lunch, because it happened like before lunch, and they were like, so nothing happens. And then I just like I couldn't have it anymore, and like my best friend was like, you need to speak up about this, and even the boys were like, you need to speak up about this. So I think like having like that support that people like don't have helps you to speak up about that, because now like he's not a teacher anymore, so I like by me speaking up about that, and it was in a Catholic school that happened, so it was like really, and he was a religion teacher too, so like how because like it just didn't add up. But it's like I feel like for me doing that, like that saved like so many other girls from like that happening to them. And then it's just tough to see like older women who have like gotten like sexually assaulted or just like anything, and they didn't speak up because they were too nervous. I think seeing like other people at the time like speak up about that stuff, like that helped like me like say something about it.
True. I'll offer this comment, that bad behavior does not stand the light of day. And if you allow your motivation to be, I'm afraid of losing my job, or that overrule the importance of yourself, then you're allowing yourself to be a victim. And I say this from a personal experience with a general officer when I was in the military. And I could see where it was going, and I made enough, just put it out in the open. I mean, I was being invited to something that there was no rationale for me to be the person accompanying him to a symposium. I mean, it just had all the writing was on the wall. And I just made it very public that, gee, isn't it interesting how the general has invited me to go along? Well, pretty soon, the phone call came and I wasn't going anymore. Because bad behavior doesn't stand the light of day. And you have to nip it in the bud, or you're allowing it to happen. And that's maybe sounding a little cold-hearted, but it comes from a personal space.
Reality is cold-hearted, isn't it? It is.
Yeah.
Reality is cold-hearted.
I mean, I was a junior officer. I mean,
Go figure.
Yeah. Lieutenant and a 2-star. I mean, where's the power? You know where the power is. But, hey.
Judy, I have a similar story and I was working in a corporation, so I know what you're talking about.
It's interesting because she quipped he was a religion teacher. Don't make any difference what they wear, what the color of the hair is.
Whether they have a collar on or not.
Yeah, and that's men or women, really. It's not just synonymous with men. Bad behavior is really on both sides. I mean, I've seen women not support women, and I could never figure that one out.
I don't understand some of the bullying that goes on in the school systems where people don't step in and say, stop that. It's pretty shocking.
Well, sorry. I talk a lot, you're good.
Growing up, like, my mom was a single mom, and this was like 2000s, and all of the moms at our school were really mean to her, and they didn't want to hang out with her. They didn't want her around, like, their husbands. And my mom is just like an angel. Like, she would never do anything. She was a lawyer. She was always working. She was always taking us to hockey, our sports, and all this stuff. And like, nobody was supportive of our family, and they were very judgmental. And even like my closest friends, like her grandma was really mean to my mom, and my mom didn't tell me this until I got older because she didn't want me to like be offended, I guess, by everybody else, but they were really judgmental.
No, they felt threatened.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was fear because she was a lawyer.
No,
You don't
she
think-
was single.
No, she was single.
Exactly.
I didn't like
As a single junior officer, you know,
but my mom
being
never
invited
tried
to
to, like,
office
just-
parties, you know, it was like daggers from the other officers' wives. You know, I was a threat.
Let's see.
Right.
Really? Wow.
You know, did I have any
Boy, you're
interest in
glad I
any of
got
those old
married.
men? I mean, it's just,
And to kind of piggyback off of everybody's point, I think a lot of bullying and comments that are being made right now have stemmed from the family. And it's your family structure. And I mean, a lot of it nowadays, people are just going with their parents' type of political views, and that's not what politics is. You should be forming your own opinion. I mean, no matter what your political views are, you need to be well informed, and that's the purpose of our government. And
You know, politics is
yeah.
a lot like religion,
Yeah.
whatever you grew up
Exactly.
with.
And it, just going by your family or listening to what your family says, like, yes, you can for a certain amount of time, but you need to be able to do your own research about it. And that's what people are missing nowadays, is you hear in the media about these different political parties and what they're doing, and you're hearing the media, you're hearing your parents, but you're not doing your own research, and that's a problem.
It's also.
and the sources,
exactly.
the sources, the readily available sources are skewed
Yes.
now.
Yeah,
You
they have their
know,
own political
it's the
agenda.
whole thing of you only see what, you know, the algorithms that are out there, you're only seeing what you already believe, you're not seeing different opinions because we've
that's a
lost,
problem.
you know,
Yeah.
the majority of print media that is, you know, independent.
Right.
You know,
And
so.
most people in the United States only speak English, so they have limited resources. We have a Zoom call once a week with relatives who are living in Israel and in England and in Italy. And I'm just amazed, because they speak many languages, that they have a whole lot of resources that I don't have because I'm stuck with English. And so when they tell me where they get the news, I'm astounded that how limited we've let ourselves be.
I think that has to do with the school systems too, because like I know like for growing up, like I had just Spanish as another like language to learn, like we learn Spanish. And then when I got to high school, I was like, well, I'm Canadian. I want to start to learn French so I can talk to my grandparents. And like just from learning French in high school and even taking a year here at Rev, I was able to make like another connection with my grandparents. And now I have to say bonjour when I talk to the phone, on the phone, like when I first talk to my grandparents, because they think I'm my mom if I don't. So like it just, I feel like that's helped me too. And now like I can start to like understand more of French, that I can kind of read some of that stuff. Like, so it's another like outlet that I have, but some people like they grow up like, oh, you can't learn Spanish, or like you can't learn a different language. In reality, you should be learning a different language, and not only just English if you live in America, because there are so many people who speak Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Greek, yeah, like so many different languages that we should be learning so many more than just Spanish or just French.
I talked to Siri. How do you say this in Spanish?
Yeah.
You know, we're closing in on the hour.
Okay.
And I feel like that flew by. It felt like it was about 5 minutes. What do you all think? Do you think we should try to set up something like this again at some point in the future?
Sure.
We only had 2 sessions scheduled, but I would love to have Riviere back again for something like this.
Count me in.
Yeah. All right. We'll be here.
We're not too bad for an old group, are we?
No, I love talking to like people, obviously who are older than me, because it just it helps me broaden my perspective and just the stories that you guys have to tell. It's just wow, that you hear it if you read a book you hear it, but just hear it from someone's perspective face to face with all of you guys that's so much better than just reading on a book.
And that was the exact purpose of that was the reason.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, we feel the same because when we see you, we see hope for the future.
Yeah,
all of you.
Exactly.
I mean,
You are the
guys
hope
are very
system.
quiet, but you are our hope for the future. It's so rewarding to us that Michelle can put something like this together because we take away from you too. We learn something new every time. It broadens our horizon,
Sure.
So I thank you for that.
It makes us happy because they seem like a good bunch.
They are.
They are a good bunch.
We're very bold. We have very interesting classes in women in politics. We've started to say that we make a shirt that we
With
say
all the
with a
sayings.
bunch of sayings. We're we should put that on the shirt. Every class, it's so fun.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for contributing in such an articulate and intellectual way. It was such a stimulating conversation, and for the respect that everyone showed to everyone else. It was really, truly wonderful, and it proves that you can have intellectual exchange and be considerate of the other person. So I really appreciate that. And in all sincerity, I would love to